everyone. Thanks for joining our panel. This will be fun, I can tell you. I mean, my job will be so easy. These are brilliant panelists, you'll see. I'm so excited to be here with you for the next hour. As was mentioned, I'm Philippe Bourbeau. I'm the co-director of the International Institute of Economic Diplomacy at HEC Montreal, which is a business school in Montreal, and arguably the best business school in the French-speaking world. We don't say that too loud here in Paris, but we make our case. The panel today, we will analyze, discuss, and present and argue on the issue of defense, autonomy, innovation, and resilience. Resilience is often understood as being two things. Either you bounce back or you bounce forward. Either you bounce back from disruption to protect the core business that you have, or to bounce forward towards transformation. One is not necessarily better than the other. Sometimes, on some occasion, you have to go back to your core business. Sometimes, on some occasion, you have to transform the core business that you have. So, without further ado, and on that note, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to present themselves a bit, their enterprise, what they do, and by describing their core activities of their business and institution, could you explain how resilience thinking is part of your approach to adaptation and adjustment to shock and change? Because there's a world of change and shock these days, and there's going to be even more in the future. So how do you tackle this? And can I perhaps suggest that we go in order of the seating plan here? So, Christine?
Thank you for welcoming me. So I'm afraid I'm the first. Christine Ricouart, I'm the SVP System Purchasing and Procurement for Dassault Aviation. Dassault Aviation is a global leader in military aviation and in business jets aviation, present throughout the entire life cycle of the aircraft. It means design, manufacturing, and commerce and customer support. So, to answer your question, resilience is at the heart of our strategy and operations. At the very beginning, in the design of our aircraft, we developed a state-of-the-art aircraft to meet the needs of our customer, both civilian and military, around three principles. The first one is the robustness and the resilience, because we need to design our aircraft to be safe and reliable. Because an airplane is not a car. If you got a failure that occurs during the flight, you cannot just go on the emergency lane and wait for the tow car the tow truck to get you anyway. So it's really at the heart of the design. Then we test this resilience in every circumstances. In extreme conditions or in the crisis, because if you think at the pilot in the Rafale, is not just going and take his plane to get over the Europe. It is in a war situation sometimes, so we need to do that. And the modularity, because we need to integrate any options that can occur during the whole life of our aircraft. I would say production is really a phase today that is very, very challenging in terms of resilience. Since the pandemic, in fact, and the many crises we faced, the latest one was the uncertainty around the US tariff. We need really to always be on the top in terms of supply chain resilience, because our supply chain is global and diversified. Yes, the Rafale is sourced in France, But for the Falcon programs, we got a supply chain that is worldwide, and especially major North American suppliers. So imagine a Rafale represents 100,000 components. If you compare to my pen, it's only 20. So, and we purchase 70% of the value of the Rafale. So, supply chain is really a key to avoid any disruption in the components, in the procurement one.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I turn to you, Victor?
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Victor Fedeli. I'm the Economic Development Minister in the province of Ontario, in the country of Canada. So it's great to be here today to join you and to talk a little bit about resilience. And it's interesting that our government was elected in 2018, and it was at a time where we needed to be resilient back then, which taught us how to be resilient during COVID, which taught us how to be resilient now after Liberation Day in the United States, being United States' closest friend and ally. I'm not sure about the friend part these days, but the ally, perhaps. The tariffs have been very, very taxing in our jurisdiction. But I will tell you, in 2018, when we first got elected, we were sliding downhill, much like Australia in the automotive sector. Ontario in Canada is the second largest automaker in all of North America, and we were sliding. And Australia went off the end of the cliff and got out of the auto business. Our premier, when we were elected, said we need to turn around and climb back up and figure out what was wrong. And our form of resilience was by cutting taxes, lowering costs. It was fascinating. All of the automakers told us our costs were getting too high in Ontario, and we began a serious reduction of taxes, 7 billion, all in Canadian dollars, all in Canadian money, 7 billion reduction in the first year, 8 in the second, 9, 10, 11. This year was 12 billion reduction in taxes and costs for businesses. And two things happened from this resilience that we found ourselves in. Number one, 1 million new jobs were created in Ontario by lowering costs. And the second was our revenue went from $150 billion a year to last week, $222 billion a year, all by taking a haircut every year. And so we learned a lot about becoming resilient and different ways of doing it, counterintuitive ways of doing it. Lower costs, higher revenue. It's very counterintuitive, but it worked. We found during COVID, the same kind of resilience happened, where we did not make PPE in the province of Ontario. We opened the cupboards, they were empty. We didn't make them. We got into manufacturing. We're the manufacturing hub of Canada. Now we make 92% of everything we buy as a province for PPE we make ourselves. Resilience. And now we find ourselves with our American partners, 80% of all our world trade, not from Canada, just from Ontario, our province of 16 million, is with the US, and 20% is with the rest of the world. And so my boss, Premier Doug Ford, has said, no more north-south, buddy. You're going east-west. And we found partners around the world. It's been fascinating. And I'll end by saying last year, 409 international companies located in Ontario, Canada, invested $40 billion and hired 24,711 people. That's the resilience that we're bringing forth. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bonjour, et très content d'être ici. I'm José Linares. I run the corporate investment bank at Banco Santander. Santander is the largest bank of the Eurozone by market cap. We have a very large retail business, a global payments business, wealth and private banking, as well as consumer and the division that I run, which is a corporate investment bank. Santander is one of the few GSIBs. That means we are a global systemic important bank. And that means there is tremendous scrutiny by our regulators, shareholders, and society at large. Every day, we manage the capital of millions of people around the world, institutions, governments, businesses, and we make payments of trillions of that magnitude. So a small mistake that we make is hundreds of millions of P&L for us and tremendous reputational risk, et cetera, et cetera. So that is to frame the stage. Now, as I'm speaking to you, the likelihood is we're being attacked on our premises, on our data centers, and our people. In fact, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that while I'm speaking to you, somebody's trying to hack me to get the keys of the kingdom and make a ton of money out of me. Now, because of all of that, we've developed a paranoia, a responsibility, a knowledge that we're constantly on the look to prevent the attackers from being successful. So I would say three things. One, it is easier today to steal hundreds of millions or billions from a bank using cyber attack than it was to go and to rob a branch where you can get some cash. The likelihood of you getting killed by police was higher, whereas today you just disappear. So the risk reward is enormous, and we gotta be on the look all the time. So that's one. Second is attack on individuals, on our people, because once you get to one of us, it is easier to navigate internally. Those two things are sort of business as usual. But in the last couple of years, because of the geopolitics, there's also states with tremendous resources, knowledge, capabilities that are trying to get into our systems, disrupt us, and steal from us, our data, our intellectual property, the cash of our clients, et cetera, et cetera. So this means we have to have everybody within the bank, systems, culture, people, et cetera, fully aligned to prevent these attacks from happening. Today, technology can replicate my boss, Anna Botín, to call me, and it's going to look like her, it's going to speak like her, demanding me, ordering me to transfer to one of you a ton of money, and it's going to be really, really hard to test what is the truth and it isn't. So we need to develop all of this paranoia and knowledge. Now, the track record is pretty strong, so that's the good news. We've gone through the financial crisis, we've gone through COVID, we've gone through the Ukraine-Russian war, we've gone through, what they call Liberation Day, and we're making it. But I think it is through that paranoia, knowledge, and constantly being ahead of our attackers that we can have the resilience and the sustainability of our operation.
Thank you so much. Sid, is it the same story for you?
Very much so. Thanks, Philippe, and thanks, everyone. I very much resonate with what Jose was saying. I think the threats and the uncertainty levels are significantly higher today than they were yesterday, and they will be even higher tomorrow than they are today. As a business at Crisis 24, we are a global corporation with 13 offices around the world and 3,000 employees, and our sole mission is working with our clients who are leading individuals, leading corporates, leading family offices, and others. We enable them to operate with confidence globally every day that they enhance or enter a world of uncertainty. What we do provide is really, it revolves around three things. We provide physical security, health security, and cyber security, as Jose was mentioning. And all of that's underpinned by government-grade intelligence that informs our clients and really allows them in this uncertain world, should and when shocks happen, to be resilient and bounce forward. Because I think these days, as governments are stretched and are preoccupied with the orders of the day, a lot of individuals and corporates are needing to take matters into their own hands in many ways around these three areas: physical security, health security, cyber security. And that's where we look to be a partner with them so that they can succeed and bounce forward given the realities that we face today.
Thank you so much. Thomas?
So Thomas Friedberger, I'm Deputy CEO of Tikehau Capital. You saw the motion design, so I won't spend too much time on it. We are an investment and asset management firm managing 60 billion US and deploying capital across different levels of the capital structure of companies to finance and to provide capital to companies in a growing mode to build actually resilience. And I'd have to say since COVID, one of our strongest convictions has been that we were entering into a world of lower growth, because the economic value creation in the world was switching from the generation of efficiency that has ruled the world for 40 years to the generation of resilience. And so for the last 40 years, between 1982 rates at 20% in the US to 2022 rates at 0% in the US, so 2,000 basis points of rate cut over 40 years, plus globalization. That has allowed a lot of companies, all companies, virtually, to over-optimize a lot of things, from their capital structure to their supply chain, to their cost, to their actually taxes. And the COVID crisis, then the war in Ukraine, then anything that has happened since then has completely changed this paradigm. And for companies will need to build this resilience by producing probably closer to their consumer, by operating with higher levels of inventories. The cost of insurance has increased. The cost of cyber insurance, of climate insurance, of corporate insurance has increased. Labor costs have increased. Companies need to operate with higher capital buffers, less debt because of the uncertainty. And so this resilience will provide a world of lower growth. This resilience will also be financed by massive fiscal expansion, which means that probably long-term interest rates are too low. Short-term interest rates will probably stay as low as possible, with central banks being as accommodative as possible, but long-term interest rates will probably rise. And also, this resilience will need to be financed by the routing of savings towards the priorities of each government. And so in this world, the few pockets of high growth probably will be concentrated on the solution providers of this resilience. There is a lot of capex to be done in this world. According to McKinsey, 130 trillion of capex over the next 5 years. That's massive. That's one time global GDP. And the providers of this resilience in aerospace and defense, cybersecurity, energy transition, strategic infrastructure, will probably experience high growth. So it will completely change the way to invest in this world.
Thank you so much. You see, I told you they were good. We'll stay on the solution aspect of it. And everyone knows now, and many of us perhaps have been surprised by this, but the world has changed. The international liberal order that has driven everything, government, countries, institutions, businesses, for the last 50, 60 years, has all but disappeared to some extent. And the order had three components. First, promotion of democracy. Second, free trade. Third, multilateralism. In all of these, there are turbulences, and we all observing that. So turning to you in sequence again, focusing on solution, I would like to hear a little bit more about what was the main solution in your own either business or sector, because there's multiple sectors on this stage here of the economy. Was really looking towards public-private partnership? Was it returning to the core business of what you were doing? Was it to transform yourself? We had a bit of a preview. The government of Ontario wants to, in part, to renew itself, try to, improve commercial relationship east to west rather than the usual typical north-south. So I would be eager to hear a bit more about solution. Is it really to protect what you have at all costs to some extent, or part of it is seeking transformation through public-private sector? How do you position yourself and your business and your sector in that category?
Hard question. I would say we in Dassault Aviation were always very concerned about the geopolitical situation because we export 75% of the aircraft we produce since 60 years. So to answer your questions, there is an axis around the development of our product. Mainly on the defense side, because we are an historical player in terms of combat aircraft for France, and we export today a lot also, and we always want to produce a state-of-the-art plane for our customer, our clients, to be able to protect their national interests, but also to act in the international security. And we do think about cybersecurity. I totally approved what has been said about the protection of the resources, internal resources, but we also need cybersecurity because our airplanes are more and more connected. It is a global trend, either in civilian or in Rafale, in the military side. So we need to protect because the very key value for us is to ensure safety of the products and the clients that are inside. So it's really key. The second thing is that we are concerned about our environment. It means the supply chains at every level of the intervention. So today it's not only tier 1 in the supply chain or direct suppliers, but also tier 3 or 5. As a procurement girl, I've been visiting very charming village in the middle of nowhere because the resilience of the supply chain is really key in that tank.
Thank you.
A few minutes ago, we spoke about 2018 and where we were with the Australia going off the cliff and Ontario lowering costs to bring these auto companies back. At that time, Reuters announced that $300 billion worldwide would be spent on new auto facilities and zero was coming to Canada, which was a very sobering thought. Today, we've landed $46 billion of that 300. And so Bloomberg announced that we were the number one, from zero to now number one in the supply chain. So we've learned how to do that. We turned our attention to life sciences and landed $6 billion in Ontario alone of life sciences, and then Liberation Day landed. And we had to take that resiliency and turn our attention then to North and South and the troubles. So who here, maybe it's just us in Canada, but I would think worldwide, wakes up every morning kind of with one eye half cocked open looking at your phone and wondering what new hell have we received this morning from Donald Trump? That's what we do in Canada because it affects us every day. And so we've looked to the rest of the world and we've seen a real polarization, a real gelling of countries right around the world. I've been to 30 international trips this year alone, 20 different countries. They all say the same thing. It's going to sound self-serving, but I will tell you what they tell us in Ontario. They tell us that in this world of turmoil, with Russia's war in Ukraine, with the war in Israel, with China's very large hand on the world's supply chain, and with the weaponization of critical minerals that China has done to the world, we've all gotten together as a world without the Americans, without the Chinese, and without the Russians. That's how we view it in Ontario. That's what's happening. And countries and companies tell us that in this world of turmoil, there's a beacon of hope, a beacon of light across the ocean, and it's Ontario, Canada. If you need a beachhead in North America to do your business, you come to Ontario. It's because of the rule of law. It's because of stability. It's because of safety. We are reliable, dependable, but mostly predictable. You know what you're going to get. And that is how we've been fighting our war, our economic war with the United States. It's been through that predictability, and that's how we were able to hit the statistics that I talked about earlier.
So I'm just going to add a nuance here. The world has changed, the liberal order is changing. That's a very European-centric view of the world. Where Santander operates, we have deep in-country capabilities in places where the world changes constantly. And so, that allows us to understand change and stay the course over the long term, not panic over what we're observing, Liberation Day, tariffs, and the craziness in the media. And you would argue that our business, which is global, will be highly impacted by deglobalization. In fact, this year we're going to report the best year ever, and stock price is the highest it's ever been. It's a bit of a contradiction if you look at it. And I want to go back to the topic of why is it such a European view? And it is because Europe is vulnerable in the current environment. Europe did outsource its defense to the US, its energy to Russia, and the banking system to the American firms. I've spent 20 years at JP Morgan. I can tell you it was easier, getting business from in Europe than taking, candies from kids. And so I understand why Europe feels this anxiety. Solutions. What are we doing? We were the first institution in the banking sector to change our policies to make sure we could be in defense. It was highly controversial. There were NGOs, there's a lot of people, and in our AGM, people come and criticize, what we were doing. And I came with the following view: there is no sustainability without security. It will be dead, so therefore I don't need to have sustainability. And that resonated very well in the Commission with Commissioner Kubilius. We've developed our ability to finance defense. We change our policies. I can go in detail later on. And to finish, we hire the most senior general of the UK Armed Forces, General Sir Patrick Sanders, to be my advisor in defense, because there's such a limited knowledge in the financial world about the sector, because it was uninvestable for the wrong reasons, that we had to bring this expertise in-house, so that now we're able to be very aggressive in terms of providing solutions in the defense sector.
Thanks, Jose. Maybe I'll just paint two pictures for you in terms of solutions. One, let's rewind back to pre-Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a global aircraft manufacturer that is sourcing rare earth minerals from Ukraine as a critical part of their supply chain manufacturing process. Activity is happening. There's rumor of a potential incursion into Ukraine by Russia. We play it forward. The invasion happens. That supply chain route of rare earths to this global air manufacturer stopped. And in the end, it cost them billions of dollars in terms of contracts for manufacturing of planes that they were not able to deliver. Now, just think if they were armed with intelligence solutions which were able to see existing Russian troop movements and also be able to forecast potential impacts of what that could do. It could allow them to set up alternative supply chain routes in advance and avoid what turned into a multi-billion-dollar loss through hard and soft dollar instances. That is a supply chain use and instance of what we bring through our intelligence capabilities. 230 analysts around the world that are former government agency analysts that really are bringing intelligence across multiple sectors to corporations and partnering with governments. And I think as that use case, there is an example for a public-private partnership with governments, but also with financing institutions to be able to, once there is a threat that's understood and realized, how can we understand that sooner? How can we get those supply chains built faster? How can we take external financing help to enable those? Government financing, corporate, I think is key. One more use case, and this is in the financial services world. Take that same use case. You have a global macro trading desk that has their daily meetings, and they're scanning a lot of newspapers every day and then going and making their trades. What happens if you had 40,000 publicly available sources that were all scanned and summarized by AI and brought to your fingertips on your iPad or your phone, such that you could be able to make smarter decisions and more holistic decisions in your trading operation? That's another use case of what we do. But it's just to say that solutions require intelligence that will allow that resilience and bouncing forward, which I think we're really on the cusp of doing and we're excited to be a part of.
So as we can see, this need for resilience can also be seen as an opportunity and not only a constraint. So on our side, as I was mentioning, this resilience, we have the conviction that it's going to have to be, to imply a lot of capital expenditure from investments from companies. The problem with that is, if we listen to somebody like Warren Buffett, he says when there is a lot of capex in a sector, either avoid the sector or be extremely selective, because only the best management or the best governments do the best capex. So building the right plant at the right place at the right time is something which is much more difficult than operating with an asset-light business. So there is that implies a lot of misallocation of capital, and that's probably topical in sectors like AI and data centers, etc. But so the conviction is that this capex is going to be concentrated on a limited number of sectors, virtually the four Ds: deglobalization, defense, decarbonation, digitalization, and that investing in the solution providers of this resilience will continue to provide high growth in a world of low growth, which, by the way, low growth is not necessarily a bad thing for the future of our species on this planet. So it also has to be seen as an opportunity. But let's take, for example, the energy transition, which also has consequences on strategic infrastructure and also AI. Energy transition, so the solution providers are mainly European today, because the regulation has been much tougher in Europe than anywhere else in the world. So companies involved in addressing energy efficiency of buildings, plants, supply chains, industrial processes, agriculture are mostly European as of today. And what we can observe is that we've been investing in this sector for the last 15 years. We are now managing the largest private equity fund fully dedicated to this practice in Europe. Those companies grew in Europe, but now they're expanding everywhere in the world, including in the US, because in the US, reindustrialize America means also that the companies reshoring need to address the energy efficiency of their buildings, their fleets of trucks, cars, their supply chain to remain competitive. So high pockets of growth in a low growth environment, and so that's the beauty of investing in the solution providers of resilience.
Thank you. We perhaps have time for one last question, sorry. And I'll change the order a bit. So I'll start with you, Thomas. So, and I'm going to try to expand my question as long as I can, so you can have a bit of more preparation, since you perhaps were expecting to speak last this time. But we're going to reverse the cycle. We talk a lot about economic security. And economic security, you've seen and you've heard, span a lot of dimensions: cybersecurity, national security, physical security, transportation security. There are financial security. There's so many aspects to economic security. And nowadays, we do realize that national security is very much intertwined with economic security. And I can tell you, I other than doing this, once in a while, I do teach. And when you in a class with undergraduate students, in 2025, when you teach a class on international political economy, it's an obvious fact. National security goes along with economic security. this was not the case 10 years ago, 15 years ago, almost 5 years ago, when I thought national security, economic security was just one aspect towards the end of the class. Now it is at the forefront of it. Does it change something, all these dimensions of security, in the way investment is made, in the way your business is doing their activities, in the way government is thinking about the future, in the way businesses are producing their own material? Does it change anything? Or is just that now we're talking about this, but the future looks perhaps a bit bleak, it's perhaps a bit more Western-oriented shock. But how do you navigate this new reality of the world has been changed, given that we accept that it has changed, at least for some countries around the world? So, Thomas, perhaps I bought enough time for you.
I mean, the short answer is it's changing everything, right? I mean, if I think about my business, 10 years ago, geopolitics and financial investing were two things that were pretty far one from another. Today, they are completely ingrown. You have to take those things into account, especially when you invest in sectors that are building this resilience, like aerospace and defense, for example. I think, you know, the way to invest, for example, in private equity will also completely change. You know, in a world of lower interest rates and globalization, I'm schematizing, but essentially the LBO business was about, you know, you buy an asset-light company, you put a lot of debt in front of that, and you wait for interest rates to go down, you refinance your debts at lower levels, you benefit from multiple expansion, and you make money. Today, and by the way, this sector was seen as, you know, speculators very far from the interest of governments. Today, private equity is completely ingrown in the strategy of any single government. I mean, the public-private partnership is live, but also companies are much more asset-heavy than before. Even in tech, look at Microsoft. I mean, they operate data centers. They even, you know, think about buying nuclear power plants to feed those data centers. So asset-heavy means a lot of capex, means that allocation of capital is key. The way the CEO of the company allocates its free cash flow, again, Warren Buffett investing 1.0, the return on capital employed is much more important than before. And so we think that, you know, investing in private equity means investing in more asset-heavy companies with less leverage. And if you look at what we've been doing for the last 20 years at Tikehau, that's what we've been doing, and it looks less appealing, but actually it provides a lot of opportunity. Aerospace and defense is a good example. It's a sector where during the COVID crisis, valuations were completely depressed. Companies were lacking capital. The supply chain was weakened by COVID, and today, actually, by injecting capital in the strongest players of the supply chain, allowing them actually to consolidate the supply chain, but also to increase the speed of delivery, you can provide massive growth. And the beauty of it is that you've got high visibility, because when you're part of the supply chain of Dassault, for example, you are probably certified by Dassault, so you have a very high visibility, very long-term visibility on your business. The companies, I mean, we are managing the largest private equity fund dedicated to aerospace and defense in Europe. The companies we have in portfolio have 12 years of backlog today. So when you have strong barriers to entry, high visibility, strong backlog, both on defense and civil aerospace, because actually supply chain is dual, it's a massive investment opportunity. But in order to tackle that, you need to completely change your software in terms of investing skills.
Thank you. Sid?
Thank you. I might just point to just an instance. In the last 60 days in the United States, they've been a series of cyber penetrations. Microsoft Azure went offline. AWS, Amazon went offline. And it's been said that over 90% of the emergency response services in the United States, state and local government run, have been compromised. So that's an issue of national security. And what does that impact? Economic security. So I would just say in the light of what we're seeing and have seen and what we will likely continue to see, being proactive and anticipatory is the order of the day. And I think corporations and governments need to do that, and they need to do that in partnership because, as Philippe was mentioning, one affects the other. If you have threatened economic security, it impacts national security, and if you have impacted national security, it impacts economic security. And so that would just be my caution, is really the anticipatory and proactiveness that's required in today's environment.
Thank you.
I would just say, when I said before there was a European view, I didn't mean that it wasn't changing. Of course it is changing. But my point was, in the rest of the world, it changes constantly, and therefore it forces institutions to be changing. It's sort of the norm that you are constantly changing. Are we changing Santander? Massively, right? But let me say what we're not changing, which is equally important. So I would say two things. Culture of the firm, and this is the reason. So we've been operating since 1857, right? So 100 plus years. And the only reason we're going to transcend history is because we're going to preserve the culture of firms, number one. And number two, which sort of goes together, is the client centricity. You just follow the clients. Client selection is the key thing. And if you follow the clients, you're going to do fine. So what are we changing? Well, we're digitalizing our entire operation, right? We used to have, I'm just going to make it up, in each country, 10 credit cards, 100 current accounts. You need one globally. So if you think about, some of our competitors in the digital space, they scale up one product and they go global. And so I think the way we're changing our firm is the antithesis of the deglobalization, because we're becoming an instrument to make sure we're incentivizing trade flows, global capabilities, et cetera. And I would finish with the following. I think we're also changing the role that a large business like ours plays in society. So we participate in a lot of the advocacy groups at the political level to make sure that society and governments wake up, smell the coffee, and do the changes that we need to do so that we can actually have a beautiful continent that we have here in Europe actually competing head-to-head with Asia, which is growing very, very fast, and the Americas that also is growing very fast.
Thank you.
So let me directly answer your question about what a government is doing, and I'll tell you what our government is doing. I'll talk about two things. So number one, here in Europe, you have 27 countries that have reasonable free trade amongst themselves. In the States, 50 United States have free trade amongst themselves. In Canada, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. And while we signed a free trade agreement in 2017, everybody kind of has some exceptions. Ontario had 23, Quebec has 39. You can't do this and you can't do that. You need a different tire pressure to cross from one province to another. So you can imagine transports pulling over, deflating their tires. Just think about what it adds to the cost of shipping from our large country from coast to coast. So we have, I call it the Trump accelerator. We went 7 years, I've sat on this committee, we've never changed a comma, trying to fix free trade. Never changed a comma. Liberation Day, third time I've had to mention it. Trump accelerator. We got together, and this fall we signed our memorandum of understanding with a new free trade agreement. Ontario dropped its exceptions. Others are lowering them. The federal government dropped their exceptions. We now have mutual recognition that you make something in your province and ship it to ours. We acknowledge that it's different, but we accept it as equal to what you'd get in ours. So that's mutual recognition. We have labor mobility. You're a engineer in one province and you want to come to Ontario, you can come Monday morning and start work. You have 6 months to get your paperwork caught up. So it's really done interprovincial trade, all thanks to President Trump, causing us to this will add $200 billion to our GDP and lower costs because of better transportation by 14.5%. So that's number one. Number two, it's caused us to look at Europe, $1.3 trillion in defense. We've signed on to the rearming Europe. Germany lowering their debt brake, releasing their debt brake, 600 billion euros going into defense. We got to get in that game. We acknowledge that. So you see us, we talked about pivoting from auto to life sciences. Here we are now squaring face right on defense. We have three of the largest defense makers, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, and RTX in Ontario. We have Algoma Steel making plate steel for shipbuilding, for labs, light armored vehicles, tanks. We've got everything the world needs. Despite what President Trump continues to say that we don't need anything from Canada, let me end by giving you a couple of quick facts. 80% of all the nickel the United States buys for its aerospace sector comes from Ontario. 53% of all the nickel United States buys for its defense sector comes from Ontario. So every morning when President Trump wakes up and says we don't need anything, he continues to forget they have one aging nickel mine in the entire United States. I have 10 just a few miles from my backyard where I live. So we have everything in Ontario that the United States needs. Thank you for allowing us here today.
I think Europe has begun to be less naive because until the Ukraine war, in fact, we gave the keys of our house to a foreigner and asked him to protect us. So, and particularly, defense industry in Europe was a dirty industry. It was not ESG compatible. So if we want to protect ourselves, we need to develop market industry, defense industry within our territories. There is a large scale of knowledge and skills in our territories, but we need to be financed. We need money for the capex. We need money for the research and development because, as it has been said, we are an industry with a long-term horizons. And if we want to integrate cybersecurity, if we want to develop drones, if we want to update any communication technologies, we need money. And we also need money to modernize all the assets and all the resources we got in the industry because I don't want defense industry, to face the same challenges that the automotive commodity has faced today in Europe, because there is a lot of competitors, and so we need to modernize. And for that, we need government, we need political and financial management to be on our side and to see the defense industry as an opportunity to develop technologies and to be at the technological frontier that is required to protect ourselves.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure that you have so many takeaways from this conversation. And I will end in a very small concluding note here before I ask you to thank them for their generosity. A shock, whether we agree on what is the shock, it might be Trump, it might be geopolitics, it might be new relationship in terms of war, it might be financial problems. Perhaps Trump is just an illustration of a trend that's been going on for more than few years. But a shock is always an opportunity, perhaps, to refine and redefine and collectively improve the identity. And in many ways, we saw that in Canada. I think in many ways, we saw that in Europe as well. Pressure, shock, forces us, institution, businesses, to rethink how they do things and then press the reset button. Fully, partially, in some sector, not everywhere, but at some point in time, this is a unique moment in history that we're living right now. Perhaps in 15 years from now, we're gonna look back and try to figure out if we made the right decision. But in many ways, this is a defining moment, I would say, in the history of, at least in commercial trade relationship. Without speaking way longer, we could go on forever but we have to stop. There's 1 minute left on the clock, which give me just enough time to ask you to thank our panelists for their generosity. Thank you so much.